My question is, why does Jesus not continue to physically reveal himself to people, particularly unbelievers, to show them that he is real?
Obviously, God could make his existence or Christ's existence more evident than he has. He could have the stars spell out God exists in the sky, or he could have every atom inscribed with the label made by God. So clearly, God could make his existence a lot more obvious.
So why doesn't he? Does God in fact exist? If he exists, why doesn't he reveal himself physically if necessary to settle the issue? Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm iSkeptic, and today I'll be looking at the problem of God's hiddenness. That clip was from a Q&A portion of an appearance by Christian defender of the faith William Lane Craig in 2013. The question of why God doesn't simply appear to us physically is often posed to Christian apologists. It seems the most important goal of Christian apologetics, after attempting to prove that God exists, is proving that God is not at fault for people not believing in him. So Craig, being a believer himself, will argue that God has left sufficient evidence to justify belief. Let's continue listening to Craig's response to see if he actually answers the question, though.
God isn't interested in just getting people to believe that he exists, to add one more piece of furniture to their ontology of the universe. He wants to bring people into a loving, saving relationship with himself.
A saving relationship with himself. What he's referring to with the use of the word saving is that God supposedly wants to save us from damnation and ultimately punishment in hell. But according to Craig, God can't save us until we come to repentance, and that can't happen without us first believing in him. This is why the issue of God's hiddenness is so important. Considering what Craig believes is at stake, namely our eternal souls, you would think God would want to make his presence known to us, as belief is mandatory for admittance into heaven. In fact, God's hiddenness is sometimes used by atheists as an argument against his existence. Now, if there's a deity that doesn't punish us in hell for disbelief, who cares if he hides? Nothing rides on us discovering him. But if Craig's God exists, we need to know it.
And I think that God, in his providence, knows how to so order the world so as to bring the maximal or optimal number of people freely into relationship with himself.
What he's saying here is that God knows what he's doing, and it's a guarantee that the strategy he's employing will bring the greatest possible number of souls into salvation. Whenever Christian apologists start talking about trusting in God's providence or his ways being higher than our ways, you should recognize that for what it is, a rhetorical escape hatch for a man who doesn't have an answer.
And he knows that it isn't necessary or profitable to have Jesus of Nazareth appear miraculously to every single person in his lifetime in order to provide sufficient grace for salvation to everybody.
Which is pure speculation on Craig's part. He's asserting that God knows it wouldn't matter if his presence were more starkly obvious. How could Craig know what God knows? And how could Craig know that more people wouldn't come into salvation if God revealed himself as plainly as he did to Doubting Thomas in the Bible story? Do you remember the story of Doubting Thomas? In it, Jesus appears to the Apostle Thomas to help him in his unbelief. It seems Thomas was something of a skeptic. In the Bible, there are numerous stories of God appearing to humans in some unmistakable way. Why doesn't God do this today if he exists?
In fact, it's possible that in a world in which God's existence was as plain as the nose on your face, in which Jesus was constantly appearing in people's bedrooms, that they would get rather annoyed at the effrontery of this intruder popping into their houses all the time uninvited.
Did you say it's possible? Notice how weak his position is here. He's speculating that people might be annoyed if God showed himself more clearly. Well, then it's possible that people would respond positively to a God who makes personal appearances. Anything's possible, right? Let's keep going.
And it wouldn't lead at all to a deeper faith or love in him.
Again, this is pure speculation. I almost feel sorry for Craig. He knows that God can't save people who don't first believe he exists. And he knows that God repeatedly revealed himself to humans in Bible stories. But rather than just admit that he doesn't have a good answer, he makes lame excuses for his God.
So I think that we can trust God's wisdom in providentially ordering the world in such a way that people are given adequate but not coercive evidence for his existence.
Again, with trusting God's providence, which is just another non-answer. Something to turn to rather than just offering the honest response of, I don't know. And I don't think appearing physically to people would count as coercion, as he did it on numerous occasions in the Bible. No, coercion would be threatening hellfire for non-believers.
And the question then for us is, how will we respond to that?
And for 17% of respondents to a 2022 Gallup survey, the answer is that many of us just don't believe in God anymore. Note that the 81% of Americans who do believe in God represents an all-time low since Gallup has been asking this question. The reasons for this drop are numerous and beyond the scope of this video, but it's obvious that attitudes are changing in the U.S., as nearly all Americans believed in God, according to Gallup, in the 1950s and 60s.
It's not an adequate response to complain that you want more evidence. You need to look at the evidence that you do have and to make a decision on that basis.
So what? Are we to believe that those of us who are as skeptical as Thomas was in the Bible are deserving of hellfire? Craig asserts that it's our fault if we don't believe in God after having been exposed to the gospel story, that we are to blame for our disbelief, and that God in his providence knows that we wouldn't benefit from seeing him personally.
But I don't think that there's any reason here to think that God would do what you suggest. It may be that would do nothing in terms of bringing a greater number of people into a saving relationship with himself.
It may be that God just doesn't exist. That would also be consistent with him being hidden. Craig is repeating himself at this point in his answer to the young man's question, and that's my cue to wrap up this video. Many of us were raised to believe that if we don't become Christians before we die, or get saved, as some Christians might put it, we will suffer an eternity in hell. I hope that you weren't taught that as a child, and I hope that if you were, you've recovered from any religious trauma you may have experienced. That is what I was raised to believe, but came to the conclusion that the doctrine of hell is merely a control mechanism for the church and not to be taken seriously. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, as I will be putting out more content in the future. Until next time, peace.